On the screen, you are about to see one of the most undrivable cars in Gran Turismo 7. The common consensus for this vehicle, the Plymouth Superbird, is that it is pretty much the most undrivable and broken car in the entirety of the game. And well, I fully agree. Perhaps the best video on this vehicle is by Hubblesphere, who named the video "Why is this car undrivable in Gran Turismo 7?", in which he aims to upgrade the Plymouth Superbird to go ahead and lap the Nordschleife faster than an AMG Black Series. If you've never watched the video, I fully recommend going ahead and watching it. I'll have it linked in the description down below, but he basically goes into finer detail as to why this car is the way it is. And as you can see from the view count alone, it seems like a lot of other people agree that this may just be the most undrivable car in the game. Now, this was pointed out to me by a viewer of mine that the Legends car dealership is currently littered with these things. Currently, there are 5 Plymouth Superbirds sat ready for you to buy, all in different colours and all with different mileage. Now, I like to think this is because Polyphony just want to show off how good those new suspension changes are and that they finally made this car actually drivable. However, more than likely it's probably for a special event in which this car has shown up for in the past, or probably an online time trial. So this gave me the idea to see if the car had really changed into something that was completely undrivable to actually functional. Now, before we get more into the video, there is something that I do want to mention. It does have a 100k wide body option. However, I would fully recommend just steering clear of this. If you ever equip this, it just makes the whole suspension issue even worse, and typically the tyres will get caught up in the archways, especially on bankings. The other thing is it has a 138k engine swap option, which is incredibly cheap for the Hellcat Charger. However, putting that much power for a car that is already typically very undrivable just makes the entire situation even worse. So I'm going to try and stay clear of these for this video. Okay, so here's the main goal with the Plymouth Superbird. I wanted it to run very well in the American Clubman Cup 600, and the main reason for this is because you see a lot of classic American muscle cars racing here, and again, typically you want your car tuned up to around about 600 pp to be as competitive as possible. So first of all, I took the car out in a completely standard form to see just how bad the issues were with this vehicle, and of course to test if it had even remotely improved with the new physics and suspension changes. And honestly, yes it has, but it's no better. So with the car completely standard, I wanted to take it through 2 different types of tests. Now the first is here at Blue Moon Speedway on the infield track. Now of course this is more of a road track type venue, so of course we can test out the brakes, the handling, and just overall how stable the car is, as well as those suspension changes. And of course next up we'd be running it on the Daytona Oval to test out its top speed and high speed stability. Now in terms of these 2 events, funnily enough, on the road course, the car was actually much better behaved than I typically expected. However, a lot of those core issues with the vehicle that have always plagued it were still 100% present, and whilst I could give certain cars a decent run for their money and even overtake a Chevrolet Camaro on the main straight, overall I just wasn't that impressed. So here are some of the issues I encountered with the default car on a road course. Now the first key issue has always been down to the aerodynamics and suspension. Even with that huge rear wing, this car is incredibly unstable and the suspension reacts in a completely unnecessary way. You also better hope that the track you're driving this car on is completely flat, as any bumps in the road will massively throw this car off. The next issue is the brakes themselves. This car weighs a stupid heavy amount, and unfortunately the brakes just don't do a good job of slowing down this huge hunk of metal. Now in terms of other issues, things like the actual tyre compound being a comfort compound really doesn't suit American muscle cars in GT7, and this car runs on them by default. It's also extremely sketchy out of corners with instant power, however it does have an overall low top speed. So next up, it was time to take it to the oval. Now again, I'm using this purely as a test. I know this car in its default form cannot go ahead and actually win here. Now a few key issues did come along with the car itself. The fact that it only has 4 gears and a top speed of 130 miles per hour, meaning it was completely off the pace. However, as soon as I got on the high bankings of Daytona, even bigger issues will become present, and that is the fact the car will just completely bottom out on the bankings. It seems to be with the default suspension and the way that the tyres are on this vehicle, where they are completely tucked in, will cause that instant rubbing issue. So not only is the car far too low for the way it can run a bank in, it's also got the issue of that it cannot actually turn the wheel, since it sort of gets caught up in the arches of the car. The next issue would of course be the fact that it is incredibly unstable because of this, and feels like it's almost being sucked to the inside of the track. And well, if you catch the inside of the track at Daytona on one of the huge bankings, you can guarantee you're going to spin around and end up in the wall. So after running the default car on both a road course and an oval, it was clear to me where the issues lie, mainly with suspension, tyres, transmission, weight, and of course a slight bit of power. So now it was time to buy parts that go ahead and solve the issue. The first thing I did was get a set of sport softs, getting the car off of those horrible comfort tyres. So straight away this seemed like a reasonable pick without putting the PP rating through the roof. After that, it was a case of increasing the body rigidity. Again, if we want the car to be as sturdy as possible at high speed, then this is an absolute must. It does drop the PP rating, but no worries, we'll end up boosting that back up a little bit later on. So after that, it was a case of getting the fully customizable limited slip differential, again allowing us to have much more control over how the car accelerates and brakes. So again, this for me was a must to stop it kicking out on the exit of corners. Now after this, it was a case of going ahead and getting that suspension on the car. Again, a lot of the issues with the car itself is because it sits far too low in its default height. So for me, once again, this was an absolute must buy to solve the car's issues. Now after that, it was a case of going ahead and putting bigger and better brakes on it. I went for the racing pads as well as the racing brake kit, again hopefully in an effort to actually slow the car down. After this, it was a case of getting a manual transmission on it. This gives us an extra fifth gear, which is hopefully going to allow it to hit increased top speeds even without putting too much power through it. Again, the car is already a 7 litre and we don't want to put too much more power through it if we don't have to. Next up was the weight. As you can see, it weighs nearly 1800 kilograms. So I went ahead and started removing all of the weight. So weight reduction stage 1, 2 and 3. And then to finish off, just to put a slight bit more power through it to 453, I went ahead and did a bit of engine balance tuning. Of course, this will balance all my internal engine components. And to finish off, I went for some aftermarket tyres, went for 16 inches, and then put the rim width to wide as well as the offset to wide. Hopefully, again, just giving it more surface. So it was finally time to test the beast and see if our changes had made any difference. So first of all, we headed back to the road course of Blue Moon Infield. Now in terms of the car itself, the first thing we're watching out for is if it handles the bumps in the road, which it did with incredible ease, feeling much better. We were also able to actually slow down the car for once, so again the reduction in weight and the better brakes really coming in clutch there. Next up was actually trying to put the power down out of corners, which the car handled extremely well. Overall so far, our changes were making a difference, and the fact that we could power out of corners without spinning up the wheels and of course kicking out the rear end made this car extremely stable. Now since we can put the power down sooner, it was time to test it out on the high speed section of the track. The acceleration was fantastic, and well, the top speed and extra gear we had with that extra fifth gear was definitely doing its job very well. As you can see, we were able to get multiple overtakes on the straight and hit incredibly high top speeds from previously. Now in terms of the final car, well, this is where the brakes really proved themselves as well as the weight reduction. We managed to outbrake the Dodge Charger here, get it down the inside and put the power down early to ensure that we got this position taken only 2 laps into the race. And in the end, we go on to take an extremely easy win. So, as for the road course, the Plymouth Superbird was finally drivable. Couple our changes with the new physics for the suspension, and overall the car felt absolutely fantastic. Road course nailed. So of course, next up we had the high speed oval of Daytona to go ahead and tackle. And well, straight away our changes would be working. As you can see, the car was getting up to speed very nicely. It was keeping extremely stable at high speed, and that extra gear once again coming in incredibly handy. And we was already starting to make very quick overtakes. And also on the banking, while the issue of being sucked down to the inside of the track completely gone. The car now incredibly stable with that increased ride height. However, we would run into one single issue. Whilst we managed to get ourselves up into P2, it would seem to be that the top speed of this car still wasn't enough. Although it was running a very handy 175 miles per hour plus, it just wasn't enough to be able to actually take the win here. As you can see, the Camaro SS would still go on to take victory. So it was back to the drawing board as we added a fully customizable computer to bump the power to 482. And this, well, it would finally do the job. Again, the issue of top speed would now not be a thing, and thankfully we were able to make the moves incredibly quickly. On the end of lap 1, we were already moving up into P2, the car being extremely stable even at the higher top speed, and then it was time to hunt down P1, which would take until the third and final lap. As you can see, going into the first couple of corners, we got a nice exit on the banking, got into the slip and hit a higher top speed of 185 miles per hour. After that, it was just time to keep it nice and clean as we built up a lead of almost 3 seconds, eventually and finally taking the win. In the end, we would manage to finally tackle the beast. So yes, the Plymouth Superbird is still very much an undrivable mess for the best part. With a few key changes, you can go ahead and completely turn this car around. And even with the new physics update, I would say this is maybe the best time to actually get into this car and go ahead and actually make it a fully drivable monster. So whilst Polyphony are pretty much trolling us with 5 of these things in a Legends car dealership, I'd probably expect this thing to show up in either a special event or an online time trial, either tomorrow or Friday. However, if you want to go ahead and try and tame this thing yourself, feel free and pick one up. Anyway, a huge thank you to all of my channel members listed on screen now, and a huge thank you to you guys watching at home. Take care guys, peace.